Welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and our show today is being recorded on February 11th, 2015. It happens to be episode 98. You can see all my episodes at my vid blog at walkinpark.com, and I hope you go check that out. So today we're going to take a look at midwinter in the Finger Lakes, starting up above the Finger Lakes, way up, and then we will go around and see some other things. So let's take a look. First of all, let's go. We're going to go up in space, way up in a satellite. This is a NASA photograph taken actually, I don't know, a couple of years ago in November, and you can see the ground is brownish because the leaves have turned. It's no longer green in the northeast. If you look up just above the center of the picture to the just left of center, up above that, you can see the Finger Lakes, and then up on the upper left is Lake Ontario, and the lower right is Long Island, the Atlantic Ocean. So going from the lower left down the Pennsylvania mountains up into New England. So that's an amazing photograph. Now we're going to take a look at it last week. Boom. Oh my, look at that. This was actually the last clear sort of day that we had that the satellites could get a clear picture. Every other photograph between now essentially and last week on the 3rd, when this picture was taken, was overcast. So I think you can see the Finger Lakes again, just left of center there, Lake Ontario just above that, partially covered by clouds, and then the Atlantic seaboard. But we're going to zoom in a little closer. Boom. This is the same photograph, just blown up, and we can see the Finger Lakes. Well, we can see several of them, and the bigger ones in the middle are the one right in the middle there is Seneca Lake, and the sort of the one that squiggles and curves up a little to the right is Cayuga Lake. But let's go back to that November picture. Yeah, now you can see all the Finger Lakes. There's actually 11 of them. The main lakes in the center. Cayuga Lake is to the left of Seneca Lake, so that's just left of that big long one in the center. It's the two branches of Cayuga Lake, and then up above that to the left of center is Canandaigua Lake, and there are 4 little lakes west of there, which I'll identify in a minute. But and then to the east of Cayuga Lake, which is the right-hand lake of the large ones, there is Owasco Lake in the city of Auburn. It's the northern end of that. Skaneateles Lake, and the village of Skaneateles is at the north end of that. And just to the east of that is a little lake, Otisco Lake, which is along with Skaneateles, part of the city of Syracuse water supply. So now we're going to zoom in again. That same picture we had before, except this one's labeled. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to read all of these, but all the way to the left there are 4 lakes that have arrows to them: Conesus, Hemlock, Canadice, and Honeoye Lake. Those are 4 little Finger Lakes. They're south of Rochester. Their water actually drains into the Genesee River, whereas all the other Finger Lakes water goes to the Seneca River and to Lake Ontario that way. All the Finger Lakes water ends up in Lake Ontario. But notice that the western lakes are frozen. See, here they are unfrozen, here they are frozen. And then Canandaigua Lake is mostly unfrozen. If you look at the top end of that, it's a little white patch that's in between Cayuga Lake and the Honeoye Lake there on the left. The northern end at the city of Canandaigua is frozen. That's just a little over a week ago. And then look at Cayuga Lake there. Now it shows 2 labels on Cayuga Lake. Cayuga Lake West Branch and Cayuga Lake East Branch. Remember, there's 2 branches. You can see it in this picture. Lower center, lower left center, so whatever I'm trying to say here. Cayuga Lake. And then the East Branch last week is frozen over. And the northern end of the East Branch is the village or city of Penyan. The southern end of the lake is Hammondsport. But notice that the West Branch is still unfrozen. Well, I got an update on that. A friend of mine wrote me and told me, see if I can get this open here. Got some notes. Where did you say? Oh, yeah. My friend George says Cayuga Lake was about 75% frozen over Saturday, this past Saturday. Most of the West Branch was frozen over, and open water was concentrated at the end of Bluff Point. And the end of Bluff Point is where the two branches meet, about halfway down the lake. And further south near Hammondsport. So it's frozen more in the last week. And so now we're going to take a look what it might get to look like and what it did get to look like in early March, which is about 3 weeks from now. So boom, look at that. Now just the only lakes that are not frozen over are Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake, and all the other Finger Lakes in early March, probably around March 1st or so, were frozen over. So that may happen. Here it is last week. Here it was a year ago, March 1st, when we had the really bitter cold last year. Maybe it'll repeat itself this year. Notice, going back to this picture, notice we got a picture looking at Cayuga Lake there. Look at the arrow is way up above the lake. But if you notice, just below that arrow is a white area. That's the north end of Cayuga Lake. That's like about 8 or 10 miles of Cayuga Lake. Freezes over because it's very shallow up there. It's only about 8-10 feet deep. So, and you can also see, if you look to the right at Owasco Lake, the northern end of that around Auburn is frozen over. That's pretty shallow there as well. And then Otisco Lake in the far eastern end there, as is labeled Otisco Lake, and is frozen over now. And more of these lakes, or more portions of these lakes, as I said, as George said, that are probably frozen over like it was a year ago. So maybe it'll get like that unless we have a big thaw. But I think it was a little colder last winter, but not a lot colder. So so we're going to take a look now. We're going to come down a little bit in altitude, but we'll still be up in the air. So this is a picture by a friend of mine, Bill Hecht. I use his material a lot. He likes to fly around in airplanes, especially around Cayuga Lake, and take photographs and share them with us. So this was a number of years ago. The northern end, this is showing that northern end of Cayuga Lake. That's up, actually the upper right there is the village of Union Springs, and the lower left is Farley's Point. And north of there, which is the upper part of the picture, is where it gets really shallow, and it freezes over virtually every winter. They do a lot of ice fishing up there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But down in the middle reaches of the lake, where it's really deep, like it is off at Taughannock Point, this is Taughannock Falls State Park, it rarely freezes. Sometimes it has some freezes up to Taughannock Park, and I've seen it do that, but not really much. Last week's show, by the way, was an encore show called Does Cayuga Lake Ever Freeze Over? And we made that show a couple of years ago. And you might want to take a look at it. Go to Walk-In Park on time. See if I can get up to my, yeah, you can go to walkinpark.com and you can find that. Just search for Cayuga Lake Freeze, and you can find that show, and it's a really good one. It's chock full of information. So I won't spend much time on that whole story of Cayuga Lake freezing, but it hasn't frozen. This is looking from Taughannock again, looking on the road to the overlook, looking north, and you see the lake is all open, of course. But it hasn't frozen over end to end, side to side, at least since 1979 or so. So it's been a long time. But about every 15 years, historically before that, it would freeze over. So, but I don't expect that's going to happen. It's more maybe we'll see something like this. This was a few years ago, looking the south end of the lake, coming down Route 13, just north of Stewart Park. So this would be the south end. Stewart Park would be on the left. And maybe we'll get that far, but it's nothing like that now. I pulled over the side of the road here. You're not supposed to do that. You can get a ticket. So I had to get the picture, but I was quick. I was quick. Last year it was so cold, we got a significant freeze at the south end of the lake. This is at East Shore Park last year, which is a little town park on East Shore Drive, just north of the Tompkins County Visitor Center. Great place to stop and see the lake. Put your feet in it. Well, maybe not this time of year. And there were ice fishermen out there. I don't know if we'll see any this year, but usually you only see them on the north end of the lake. But we even had some fishing down there last winter. They have this little hut and go in and get out of the wind, and sometimes they build a fire somewhere, or they have a heater in there anyway. And the guy sitting down he's actually got a pole, and if you look to the right, lower right, you'll see this blue auger, ice auger, and that's how they drill a hole in the ice. It's maybe, I don't know, 8-10 inches wide or something, and then they fish through it. They sit there and they fish, and they also set up a little automatic pop-up kind of thing that when a fish gets on the hook, a little flag comes up and they can pull the fish out. But not my cup of tea, or whatever you want to call it, but people love to do that, especially when the wind's not blowing. But the biggest freeze we've had on record may have been in 1912. I know it was a big freeze in 1912. I don't know if anything has equaled it. And the lakes, Cayuga Lake and Seneca Lake, both froze over really hard. And people went out on ice boats, and here's some ice cutting, and skated the lengths of the lake and what have you. Here was an ice cut. This is ice cutting actually on Seneca Lake, but they did this up in the northern end of Cayuga Lake, and there was actually quite an industry there, where they had basically a factory building. They'd bring up all the ice from Cayuga, New York, and ship it out by rail, because we had a rail service. We still do, not that far up though, just to the power plant. But here's a guy that went ice fishing. This was a photograph taken on the west shore of Cayuga Lake somewhere. And let me see if I can get the information on that. I've got notes here somewhere. Scroll through, coming right up. Let's see. Okay, yeah. New York. This was from the New York State Conservationist magazine a year ago, February 2014, and taken by Heidi Orapallo. And she wrote, "I was surprised to see a mink fishing close to shore. He was quite curious and watched me closely. He would jump in the lake, swim a bit, and then jump back onto the ice. He did this a number of times. The last time he came up with lunch." So that looks like a little bluegill or something like that he's got there. Okay. And then the staff writer from Jenna Kerwin, a staff writer from the Conservationist, wrote, "Great photo, Heidi. Mink are generally solitary animals and live near lakes, streams, and swamps across the state. As you saw, they are equally at home on land or in water. Medium-sized weasels. Adults average 1.5 to 2 feet long and 1 to 3 pounds in weight." So they are weasels. They're in the Mustelidae family. They're carnivores and will eat a variety of items, including small mammals, fish, birds, amphibians, crustaceans, insects, and reptiles. During winter, fish are a common meal. I saw one once actually in Buttermilk Falls, grab a fish and eat it like a sandwich, holding it with his 2 paws, and he just took bites. So they're amazing little animals. The minks are. You don't see them very often. I see them about once every 30 years. So now we'll go a little closer to home to Ithaca Falls. Has been full of ice, as it tends to get this time of year. So I've got a couple park minutes I've done this winter on Ithaca Falls and its ice. So I'm actually going to show you one I did last week. And so let's bring that up here. That's the right one. Yeah. Okay, so last week at Ithaca Falls. Okay. My favorite part of that is that little stream at the end, the little stream on the ice that curls around that tree and makes a little S-shaped stream. Now I'm going to show you another video of the same spot, similar conditions, a little bit colder though, a little bit icier. This one I did in January of 2014, so let's take a look at that. Get up the next video. Sub-zero weather turns 150 feet high Ithaca Falls into a glacial cliff. Fall Creek heads towards Cayuga Lake under a sheet of ice. Of course, last winter is when we had the flooding in Ithaca caused by ice jams, because so much ice formed on Cascadel and Fall Creeks that when you had a thaw, it broke the ice up some, it dammed the creek, overflowed and flooded the neighborhoods in the north end of Ithaca near Cayuga Lake. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year. So it's been very cold the last two winters in the Northeast, and that's kind of like, what's this global warming business? They said last year was the warmest year on record on planet Earth, and 10 of the warmest years have occurred in the last 13 years or something like that. Of course, the West has been warmer than the East, and we've got this jet stream that's dipping down and letting the Arctic air come down. We're getting all this snow, but you get cold, really bitter cold Arctic air drooping down on the jet stream, and then it hits the warm Atlantic Ocean. The mid-Atlantic has warmed up, so there's more moisture coming off it. Maybe that has something to do with why having all these nor'easters. So I won't get into a big lecture about that. But anyway, now we're going to change seasons. We'll go to summertime. Summertime, wouldn't that be nice? Let's go over to Watkins Glen. I've got another little video to show you there. I'm working on a series of videos about Watkins Glen, so you'll see them over the next few months. But we're going into a section of the gorge. The first section of the gorge above the main entrance, if you know the park, is, in the old days they called it Glen Alpha. And it's a really spectacular section. It has waterfalls and high cliffs and so forth. So let's take a look at one of my park minutes that I've done recently, actually last week, about Glen Alpha. At the end of Century Bridge, Glen Alpha opens up to you. You peer up the stream as it runs toward you through a twisting, narrow, smooth channel of rock. Beyond, high walls of stone enclose a huge, cool cavity in the earth, threaded by the stream and waterfalls. Across the gorge in Glen Alpha is an impressive cliff cut by enormous vertical fractures. Stone has fallen from slots between these joints, as they are called. Joints are caused by compression and expansion of rock layers, and they are found in rocks throughout the world. The layered rocks of Watkins Glen and of central New York State were intensely compressed 200 to 300 million years ago, when these rocks were deeply buried and the Appalachian Mountains farther south were being pushed up. Other cliffs in Glen Alpha have very flat vertical cliff surfaces. These occur where rock has fallen away from one side of a joint, exposing the flat surface of the remaining face of the fracture. You will pass many more joints during the rest of your walk through Watkins Glen. Well, as it says, if you want to see all of my park minutes, and like there's more than 30 of them, go to my vid blog. I call it walkinpark.com, and you can find them. You can search for park minutes. There's a category list there. So that's fun. And also you notice that was I mentioned my book, that I have a walk through Watkins Glen, water, sculpture, and stone. And so this video series is based on that book. And you can find out more about that at owlgorge.com. Okay, we're going to go to another, stay in Glen Alpha, and we're going to look at down along the stream and another park minute, Finger Lakes Park Minute. So let's go there. Get that one up. In the middle of Glen Alpha, a staircase descends to a little landing lower in the gorge. Here, a stupendous rocky scene rises around you. Two waterfalls are visible upstream, and the creek follows a twisting, polished path in the other direction toward Entrance Cascade. The cliffs above are rough and broken, with an occasional tree here or shrub there on the slope of rocky debris at the bottom. But down along the stream, the steep rocky flanks of the creek are smooth and winding with very few plants. This is the flood zone, scraped by sand, gravel, and stones, in torrents caused by heavy rain or melting snow. One front line of downward erosion where floods deepen the glen and smooth its rock. Okay, that's all I got for you in Glen Alpha, but that series will continue, and I'll have another one out. Well, no, actually I have this one out this week, and I'll try to do another one next week. I got a lot going on. We're going to be doing some stuff with Robert Treman State Park real soon, so because I'm a member of the Friends of Treman, the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park, and we're going to have a presentation, Treman Park Then and Now, which we'll be doing on the 22nd at Kendall of Ithaca in the auditorium at 2 p.m. free and open to the public, and then I will put that up probably the following week as a walk in the park. Okay, so now we're going to go take a look at some photographs that my friend Bill Hecht, I said he takes these aerial photographs, but he also likes historic photographs, and he finds all these historic photographs in historical societies and libraries and museums or what have you, and he scans them on his computer and puts them out there for people to use. And I use a lot of them. So what's going on here? Well, this is what they call a stereograph, and a stereograph is a well, in the old days, 100 years ago and more, you could get this stereoscope, and you could put these cards in it that had two pictures that were taken just next to each other by a double camera, and took the same scene but slightly offset, just as your eyes are. And in the stereoscope, you'd look at this and it would become a 3D picture. And I had those little viewfinders when I was a kid. You could get 3D pictures. I don't know why they don't do something like this anymore. They try 3D movies and even 3D TV, but it hasn't really taken on that much. But anyway, so this is the picture of the lip of Taughannock Falls back before 1895 or so. And because the lip broke off after that, it projected at a point. Here's the colorized version of it, of the same picture. Maybe this one was colorized and just scanned it black and white. I'm not sure. No, actually, I think this is a colorized version of the same thing. And pretty cool, huh? And is that a guy on the other side there? They often have people in them. And there used to be an overlook on the south side of the gorge. Now we have an overlook at the north side of the gorge, but this is on the south side. There was an old hotel there called the Cataract House, just as there was a hotel where the current falls overlook is at Taughannock. There was a hotel there called the Taughannock House, and both of them are gone, long gone. But there's a picture taken from the Cataract House overlook, and look at how the point of Taughannock Falls projected out. And I think it was in the winter of 95, 96, or 94, 95, something like that. I think it was 90. Anyway, about mid-1890s, it broke off. So there's a picture later, and you can see that it then projects in instead of projects out. And now it looks something like this because the rocks are falling away from the lip of the falls. Still maintains that V from the big rock fall in the mid-1890s, and but rock is falling below that. So eventually these pieces are breaking off, and eventually it's going to change. So to bring us back to reality and the present, the falls look something like this right now. They get frozen up, and they develop this huge ice dome at the bottom. It's sort of like a volcano in reverse, and ice water pours into it and pours out at the sides. You can see just to the right of this right side of the upper part of the dome. Let's see, it's a different color. That's actually ice water pouring out of a hole in the dome, and then it freezes and makes all that sort of ice lava all over the dome there. So that's a pretty amazing thing to see. And of course you can walk up the gorge in the wintertime normally and get not up to that, but up to the end of the trail. You can see that dome as well. So that's well worth a trip to Taughannock Falls State Park sometime soon. I need to do that myself. That picture was actually from a year ago. I haven't been up there since it's iced up, so I'm due. Let's take a look. Well, no, actually we're kind of running out of time here, so can't do that much more. See what else I might have to share with you here. Well, I've got a lot more, but I can't show it to you. So I'll show you one more picture here. This is American Samoa, I think, and it's kind of a national park there. And this is a winter picture. So I thank you all for joining me. We have now got to take off, and I'll see you another week maybe. Walk in the park. Thanks a lot. Okay. There's a parting shot there. Stewart Park in the summer. All right.